Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Legendarium podcast. Today we are talking about tropes. This is one of the topics that I hear the most about when we're doing Wheel of Tangents or just asking you guys for commentary on the books that we're talking about. You guys talk a lot about tropes. And so we're going to devote an entire episode to tropes. The good, the bad, the ugly, the whatever. How to use them, how to avoid them, what to do with them when you come across them as you're reading. And with me today, I should say, my name is Craig. Most of you know this already. But with me today is Dan Ford. Dan, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Not too bad. I see you've gone the easy way. You just picked up the mic so that you could get it right up in there.
It seemed better. It was, I don't know, seemed quiet the other way. I feel like an old-timey radio guy holding the mic right here.
We need to get you a cable to hang from the ceiling so you can be a boxing announcer with that kind of circular mic there.
There you go.
So if anybody wants to look up Dan online, you're going to have to look up Daniel M. Ford, author of the Paladin trilogy, among other things, including, among those other things is a brand new trilogy that you're going to tell us about a little bit later.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Dan, tell us, before we get into the tropes and all that stuff, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. People already know that I'm not qualified to talk about this subject. That's fine. But what are your qualifications or non-qualifications?
Well, I'm a huge nerd. I have been devoted to reading fantasy since I was 4. My dad read me The Hobbit when I was 3 or 4 years old, and it was all downhill from there, I guess. That's right. Fantasy, tell stories, the only thing I've ever wanted to do. That doesn't really pay all the necessary bills. So I'm also a high school English teacher. So talking about books is kind of literally every way that I make my living. Yep. I've been reading fantasy for, like I said, for 40 years. I've been writing it now for almost as long. Since I was 11, I think is when I started my first novel. And yeah, I obviously think about fantasy literature a lot. It's kind of on my mind all the time.
As is right and proper, I would say.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you are a high school English teacher because do you have your students write any stories, or is a lot of essays and reactions and that sort of thing?
I don't do a lot of fiction. I at the school I teach at, comp and lit are separate tracks. So in my comp class is actually media literacy. So it does involve like creating videos and things like that are scripted. But in my lit class, which is British literature, I think I have some creative assignments sprinkled throughout, like write a ghost story when we read Frankenstein. Right, since Frankenstein came about because people were having a competition to tell the scariest story. Yeah. And then Mary Shelley just said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and invent Gothic literature and science fiction all in one go.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Amazing.
Or there's an option to pretend you're, in the Royal Navy and write letters home when we're reading Persuasion, which is set in 1814. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The reason I ask is because you take a young writer, in this case, whether they want to be or not, right? These are writers. Yeah. And if you're trying to construct a story as a young person without a ton of maybe experience under your belt, you're probably going to lean on some tropes. Have you found this to be the case with these students?
Yeah, definitely. When I have taught science fiction and fantasy writing as an elective, where the kids can, choose to take the class for a quarter. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of people getting separated into different houses or groups based on some trait they have. There's a lot of, special children of destiny who don't know they're the special children of destiny. There's a lot of, there are, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever the special number is of special people with special powers who all happen to be teenagers, who happen to be, 13 or 14 years old. So they lean on the things they've read, right? They lean on the books they've read. They've read dystopian fiction, they've read Veronica Roth, they've read Harry Potter, they've read other books that I haven't read, so I can't say what they're getting, but like it's a lot of,
or what have you.
Yeah, it's a lot of not as much dystopia now, but more, but a lot of special children of destiny in different kingdoms kind of thing. That seems to be the way they're going.
So let's back up. I just thought that was interesting. You teach high school English, and maybe we can come back to this idea of young writers or inexperienced writers leaning on that. Actually, no, I did have one other thing I wanted to say about that, which was of course you do, and you should. If you're just starting out, lean on those tropes. You're probably not going to be publishing the first thing you write. So go ahead and lean on the tropes. Just get used to writing, get used to that flow. And then you'll kind of, as you write more and more stories, discover where you like to break from the traditional tropes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is how we learn from the time we're babies, right? You just repeat whatever your parents said, and then you figure it out over years. Yeah. So, okay, let's talk tropes then. We're supposed to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Well, that's our title, but we'll see how much of that we get to. Are tropes good?
I mean,
how do you think of them?
I feel like that's like asking a musician, are keys good? are chords good? Yeah, of course they're good. They can be played well or they can be played badly, right? Like our brains organize things into patterns, right? So when we see these patterns occur in fiction, we have to label them, and we've decided to call them tropes. And we have, websites devoted to categorizing them and finding all the places in books where they are. And sometimes authors are using them intentionally, for sure. And sometimes we just found out, we just learned that we did this trope and people liked it, and we didn't know that's what we were doing, right? But tropes are good. That's because, or it's not that they're inherently good or inherently bad. It's they're used well or they're used badly.
Yeah,
is what I would say.
The reason I presented it that way is I think of the word trope a bit like the word, say, ideology or dogma. There are words that we have that people seem to think are shorthand for something that they are not shorthand for.
Yeah.
And so like dogma, for instance. Oh, what's the old bumper sticker? My karma ran over your dogma.
Right.
People think dogma. Oh, you're hidebound. It's bad. It's like, well, no, it depends on what the dogma is. You can have good or bad dogma. And with tropes, it's the same way. It's like you said, you can play them well or you can play them poorly. I would say there are some tropes that, probably are either tired or were never good in the first place and can be retired. Yeah. But for the most part, like, hey, the chosen one, there's a chosen one. It's like, yeah, that's a very long-standing, old trope. Now do it well.
Right.
Or people are going to hate it.
Well, I'd like somebody else to do it well. I don't want to try that one. Somebody else can take that mantle.
What are some of your favorites? What do you like to use?
I definitely wind up using found family in every book that I write. Like, that just keeps happening. In the Paladin trilogy, I start with a character who's walking away from everything he knows and all his power and all his friends and all his family, and he's completely alone in the world. And there's literally there's him, and there's the woman who becomes his best friend, who's like the mom, and they take in 2 kids, and then there's like this grumpy dwarf who's like an angry grandpa, and that just happened. And then I wrote a mystery novel series with a guy who lived on a houseboat, and he didn't talk to his family, and like he had his best friend that he met with at the gym, and then her wife, and he hung out with them. Like, he went to their house for Thanksgiving instead of that kind of thing. And then now in my newest series, once again, it's a character she's a city girl, and she's sent out into the middle of nowhere in the country on the frontier, and she doesn't know anyone and she doesn't know anything, and she has to learn how to be and what to do there. And, how to make friends with people that don't have your experience at all, and winds up becoming close with some of them. And, the found family is emerging over the course of the first 2 books, I would say.
Yeah. So the found family, that's the joke version of that is Vin Diesel and the Fast and Furious movies, right?
Right. Family as superpower.
Yeah, well, that's right. You find your family, and suddenly you can drive in space too.
Yeah, exactly. You can drive in space, and you can rip the door off a car and use it as a bulletproof shield. Why not? Because family.
What about give me a trope that you either disdain or that you maybe just don't feel like you want to use. You're not equipped to use it. You don't have any desire to, whatever.
The trope that I'm definitely done with, that I when I come across it in a book, like I'm out, I'm done, and I'm not gonna write it if I find myself writing it. I'm gonna stop. Is it's I guess it's come to be called the fridging, you know? So, but I think of it more as like when the female character has to die in order to fuel the male character's pain, right? And has to use that to fuel his rage in the coming fight. I'm done. I'm out. If you're gonna, I'm all for killing characters. Characters aren't safe in my books. Fair warning. But there should be a reason why they die, and it especially shouldn't be a woman character dies to make a man angry or sad.
Fair enough.
Right.
Yeah, that's the first episode of the new Wheel of Time show, which I'm guessing you watched.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, of course I did. And I did. There's a lot of things in that show I like. Any show that's going to do Al Landman Dragarin justice, I'm going to watch it, and it seemed like it did. So
yeah, I think I'm with you there. But yeah, that was. I got to a place where I was okay with the show right up until that final episode of the first season. But it took a while because in that first episode, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah,
what are you doing?
Giving Perrin a wife of like the girl he kind of flirted with at home. Right. I'm actually like doing a big reread of the Wheel of Time right now. So like all that stuff is nice. Right in my head. That was like they changed that character. They changed who she was just to have her die terribly to affect Perrin in the first episode of the series. You know.
So I'll give you one of mine that I really enjoy. And it's talk about a tired old cliche. Don't care. Love it till the end of time. And that is the Tavern. We have it in the Wheel of Time. We have it in, Shannara or the Belgariad or whatever. There's always a tavern. Or what's the Pat Rothfuss books,
Yeah.
So,
but I don't remember the name of it, but yeah.
Name of the Wind, yeah. What was I going to say about it? Yeah, the Tavern. I love it. Maybe for some of the same psychological or emotional reasons that perhaps you like the found family trope, which is I like having this gathering place in the tavern, this place that the whole town comes to, with the wise barkeep, behind the bar that brews his own ale in the cellar and whatever.
For me, the source of that trope, it comes before, but is the Inn of the Last Home in Dragonlance.
Okay.
Where that's where like all the heroes get. It's literally where the book starts. where the books, the whole Dragonlance series starts, because the heroes all agree they're going to meet there in 6 years or whatever after they've been off on their own adventures. I love a tavern. In fact, it's an inn more than, but like plays a major role in my newest book, in the Warden. And there is literally a wise old, he's not old, he's like middle aged. There's like a pair of guys who own it. And one is like the front man and one is the cook. And it's where the main character, like that's where she starts to connect to the town. It's just by being there a lot. And like whenever she leaves her tower, that's the first place she's going, is the inn. Yeah.
It's one of those things that makes me wonder how misleading like medieval fantasy settings are. If you can go back 700 years, were there taverns that people actually gathered at? Was this a thing, or did somebody just people love their local bar now, so they put it into their fantasy stories at some point in the past? I don't know the answer to that.
I was in a pub in Ireland that had been open since 1602.
Ooh, okay.
So
there's an indication.
They've been around a long time.
Yeah. I guess. I just love that, like the town, the center of the town, the source of all the
I'm with you there. I can't get enough of that.
I'm trying to think of ones that I don't care for. Oh, I'll give you one that I don't care for as much, and that's like racial shorthand. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is like you have the elves, you have the dwarves, you have the gnomes, the this and that and the other, and they all act like X. They
Hmm.
all look and think and act like X. And so, like one example of that, we're big fans of Brandon Sanderson around here, and reading through the Stormlight archive, it's like, oh, it's a Thalen. Okay, great. So they're a merchant,
Uh-huh.
and they, and they like to haggle. Oh, they're from I can't remember all the names of the countries, but oh, okay, so
Sure.
you're definitely a warlike soldier character because you're from here. Um, and yeah, that kind of bugs me a little bit because it reflects something I don't like in the real world, which is, hey, these are, if you're going to create a character, make them an individual,
Yeah,
um,
agreed.
with some exceptions, but as a rule, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I actually, in my first trilogy, I had to kind of fight a little bit with an editor at one point over there's a major dwarf character, and the editor kept making him sound Scottish. And in a lot of fantasy novels, dwarves sound Scottish. And I'm like, no, this dwarf sounds like a used car salesman from Jersey. He's not Scottish. He's not like a dwarven warrior carrying an axe. He's an alchemist and a con man. And like, I'm not, and he lives in a wagon. Like all the dwarves in that world are like live in wagon trains. Um, and so, yeah, I had to like fight over that because this one editor just kind of thought from their reading that dwarves were supposed to sound Scottish, which they do in a lot of fiction. Actually, they say laddie and och and I and
Right.
all this stuff.
Freaking dwarves, man.
Yeah.
Well, so what would you say to somebody who, you know, let me ask it this way. How should we think about and deal with tropes as we come across them as readers? So maybe we can get into the writing stuff in a bit, but as readers, you come across these things, and do you just kind of accept that these exist? What if you feel like it's done badly? How should this affect the way we
I
view
mean,
the stories we read?
if you feel like it's being done badly, you can stop reading the book. Like that's always an option, right?
Not
If
for
the
some people. Not
Yeah,
for
that's
some.
true. I guess I've reached a point. I used to be like that when I was younger. I start reading a book, I'm going to finish it. I don't do that anymore. I don't have enough time. There's always more books in the world. If I'm not enjoying a book, if it's not working for me, I'm going to put it down. I might come back to it later. But yeah, I stopping is always an option. Um, I would say, like, is it working for you? Are you enjoying it? If yes, then don't worry about the trope, right? It like if the point of this telling stories and reading stories is pleasure, right? Is enjoyment. Um, and I feel like that's always got to be the first thing. And the pleasure can be a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But if it's working for you, don't worry about it. I
Yeah.
guess. Maybe that's too simple an answer.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I guess I'm still kind of thinking about that the dogma point that I was making earlier.
Mm-hmm.
People, they detect a trope, and then they go, "Oh, well, this is lazy. I don't like
Yeah.
this. This is a badly told story." And I guess that's just not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I would say the author, the writer, probably didn't detect the trope when they were writing. At least I don't think about that while I'm in the process of composing. I don't stop and think, well, let me make this character the badass grandpa and this person the town dad and like this person, you don't do that. Like they're people, they're characters, you have a plot that you're trying to accomplish. Yeah, I guess some of it depends on if you're outlining or if you're making it up as you go along. I tend to do the latter. But when I'm writing, I'm very character focused. They feel like real people to me. They're alive in my head in a very real way, and it
Mm,
makes me sound a little unhinged maybe. And I'm just trying to portray like this is what they're going to do in these circumstances, and I'm not thinking about them in terms of tropes. I'm trying to think of them as people. And then if they get classified into tropes by fans, that's out of my control. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to worry about it. Well, I'm probably gonna worry about it, but I'm gonna try not to. But the writer probably wasn't thinking in those terms, right? They were probably, there's things you're trying to accomplish in the story, and hopefully things you're trying to challenge yourself with. But mostly I'm trying to tell a good story. And then kind of when I get into the revision process, then I'm like, okay, I'm trying to do these things, but there's been no point where it has entered my head, I am consciously using this trope and doing this thing and following this pattern. I know I do it, but it's not what I'm thinking. It's not part of my composition process.
So, okay, so you say you start with characters first, rather than trying to find the story beats. Those come a little bit later, more naturally with the characters. Did you ever see? There's just a fabulous episode of South Park years ago when they were talking about they were sending up Family Guy, and they go to the Family Guy writers' room, and it takes them 2 episodes to get there, and they finally break into the Family Guy writers' room, and it turns out the writers' room is this giant aquarium with manatees that pick up beach balls and move them from one side of the aquarium to the other, and the beach balls have have like jokes written on them, or they have 2 random subjects, and then they put them together and turn it into a non sequitur joke, which is exactly how Family Guy is written. So I'm imagining, what if you did it the other way? You wrote a story and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna pick some tropes that I love and tropes that I hate out of a hat, and jumble them up and then see what kind of story comes out of it. That could be an odd way to write a story.
I think that could be an interesting, like, creative writing exercise. That could be like an interesting workshop thing. Like, write a 5-page, pick your trope out of a hat, write a 5-page story that incorporates it. Don't tell the other people in the workshop what trope you got. They have to guess. That's how I would do that as a teacher. Like, don't even tell me which trope you got. Because when I go to read your piece, I want to see if I can detect it and how well it's done. That's how I would handle that. Like, I think that is actually, I might write that down. That's not a bad creative writing exercise for teaching a workshop sometime. But yeah, no, I haven't. Those are 2 shows I haven't watched in 20 years. So didn't see it, but I get the idea of randomly constructing a thing out of tropes. It could be fun to do with a group too. Like, everybody get one trope and then pass the story on, and then see how the tropes fit together.
Now that I think about it, that's probably the way a lot of D&D campaigns work. People getting together and constructing their characters, and they think of their favorite or least favorite tropes and start putting them, shoving them into their character. The absolutely. Dungeon Master, I'm sure, is using a lot of that stuff. So
yeah, I mean, I'm about to start playing in a new D&D campaign next week. And I realized as I was making my character, like, I just made John Wick, but a paladin. Guy with violent past, and he's straying from it, and like, he's hung up his sword, and he's never going to touch his sword again. Like, he's totally going to touch his sword again. He's going to do that in the first session.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And that is itself a trope, right? The guy with the person with the violent past who's leaving it behind, but they have to do it again. For what
just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. When I thought
I was out. Exactly.
Yeah. So we've got some good tropes. We've got some bad tropes. Let's talk about the ugly. Are there any that you can think of that really that either, like I say, need to be retired, or that need to be handled with care? If you got any off the top of your head, let them fly. But I've got one.
Okay.
If you need to think about it for a second.
I do need to think about it.
Yeah, mine is the Dark Lord trope. And here's why. Depending on the type of story, it can work really well. If you're doing a story that involves kind of a morality tale of good versus evil, you've got Gandalf and the forces of light versus Sauron, the Dark Lord, and his forces. That works because of its he would hate me for saying the allegorical nature, but to some extent,
boy.
Yeah, I know. But to some extent, there is like this good versus evil thing that's going on, and so
competing moral systems, basically.
Yeah. So it's basically what it comes down to is your universe that you're constructing undergirded by the kind of Judeo-Christian system that we all kind of live and breathe in today. If it is, then you have God versus Satan, the Dark Lord being Satan, and it can work that way. That's okay. But once we unmoor our world from, we're trying to create an amoral universe, or trying to reject uh, that sort of traditional version or way of looking at things. The Dark Lord, I'm finding, and people who listen to our Joe Abercrombie episodes know where I'm going with this. I'm finding, as I'm reading about Dark Lords in other types of worlds, that it starts to get very conspiracy theory real quick. It feels weird to me, and just to put my cards on the table, I just can't stand the kind of. I feel like we're soaked in conspiracy theory these days, and it drives me really crazy. And so I find the Dark Lord trope sometimes feeding into that in a way that makes me just like, ugh, yeah, it makes me go hands off.
Yeah. So yeah, I haven't written like a Dark Lord. In my first trilogy, it was very much like evil was like ambition, right? Not ambition to do well and be the best person you can, but ambition to like control,
to power.
To the will to power was like what made people evil and what made them do evil things. But it wasn't like there wasn't like some guy sitting in a tower willing them to do that or creating armies to do it for him. And like there is a bad guy in the Warden. I don't want to say too much about it because the book just came out. That there is a thread throughout this series of books of what it is that's evil and what it is that our main character is fighting against. But it's not a Dark Lord. It's again, it's ambition, but it's a specific kind of ambition. I don't want to say what because I don't want to. But yeah, I get it. It can feel very samey too. Like I've read this story before,
samey. Okay.
I actually do have a manuscript kind of in the tank that hopefully does the Dark Lord and the war between good and evil a little differently, because it's like that's happening. People are calling it the war to end the age, but the only perspective that the reader gets is 5 ordinary spear carriers in the army. They want to get drunk. They want to get plunder. They want to go home. There is a great wizard. There's a king. There's a Dark Lord. There's a dragon. They don't want to come near any of that. They don't want any part of that. They don't want to see, they get sucked into things, but like, we don't know what the machinations of the great wizard are. We don't know. They don't know anything about the Dark Lord or his history. So you're not going to find out. Right. So hopefully that will see the light of day someday.
Interesting. So yeah, any that you would retire or be at least very careful with?
I would be very careful. I mentioned this earlier, like this, let's call it the sorting hat of like, we're sorting people into 4 groups or 5 groups or 6 groups because you are pigeonholing people. You are saying you are one thing. And once you are saying people are one thing, like they're not interesting anymore, they're not whole people, you are robbing them of the chance to become complex characters, because people are rarely ever one thing, right? People are rarely ever one thing.
It's the elephant in the room with that one, of course, being Harry Potter. That's one of the best things that Rowling did with that series, was to kind of break her own rules with the houses and actually flesh out the characters that you need to know.
I have some thoughts about that as a teacher.
Yeah.
Like the entire staff of Hogwarts should go to jail. They're terrible teachers. They're terrible people. They're terrible leaders. Like, they're terrible at everything. And I guess my real problem is the way that it treats. I mean, I have a lot of problems, but the problems with that particular trope is with the kids who get sorted into like Slytherin. It's like, well, you're like in Crapsack House. You're Crapsack people. You're Crapsack kids. That's all you're ever going to be. Deal with it. And that's not the way. You can't treat teenagers that way, or they'll only ever be Crapsacks, right? You got to treat them as people. You got to treat them as whole people.
I think I'm with you on the, like in the first book or the first 2 books or something, but I see it rounding out as it goes. but I get where you're coming from. Yeah.
So that and the sorry.
No, go on.
That and like the fridging kind of thing that I mentioned earlier,
Right.
the woman dies for man pain. Like can we stop doing that? Can we just let that go?
So let's finish up then with I'm going to finish our tropes conversation by asking for some listener thoughts. So go on Discord. If you're listening, you should be on Discord because our Discord community is amazing. There will be a subsection, whatever, I can't remember what they're called, a thread for this episode. Hop into that thread and let us know what yours are, the good, the bad, the ugly, the stuff that you hate, the stuff that you love, how you think about tropes. I really do want to hear from people because, like I said at the beginning, this is something that I know our listeners often have lots of thoughts about. And so now is the time to get them all out. So hop on Discord, let us know what you think.
Hey, shoot me an invite to that server. I'll come in and if people disagree, I'll take lumps. I'd love to hear what people have to say about that.
Absolutely. We'll get you on there.
Okay.
But what they should also do, maybe before they jump on Discord and start hammering away at both of us, they should go buy your books.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes, they should.
So there's the Paladin trilogy that I mentioned. That came out, 5 years ago-ish?
Yeah.
5+ years ago. Mm-hmm. But now there's a new trilogy called The Warden.
Yep.
Warden, tell us a little bit about it.
So The Warden, or book 1 of the Warden series, is about a young necromancer named Ailish Cairistiona de Lenti Untiraval, or just Ailish for short.
Okay, thank you. Whoa. Here's a trope for you. How many apostrophes are in this name?
None.
Oh, okay.
None.
You missed one there.
I read too many. I read all the R.A. Salvatore books when I was a kid. I love them, but I'm not doing apostrophes. I'm done with apostrophes. So Ailish just graduated from the Lyceum, the big magical university. She has become a warden, which is like a wizard that is empowered to enforce laws and protect people. Her primary specialty is necromancy. She's a city girl. She's rich. She's privileged. She's used to being the smartest person in the room, or at least the loudest person in the room. And she expects she's going to get a posting in one of the cities that she loves. Right. And instead she gets sent to a sheep herding village called Lone Pine that's 800 miles away. It's on the edge of the frontier. The nation that she's in is like recovering from a war with orcs. The orcs are kind of like fantasy Vikings. And the nation kind of lost. So this nation got cut in half. And she has no idea why she got sent there. She assumes it's politics. Her mentor didn't like her. So he stuffed her out there, and then she gets there. She doesn't know how to talk to these people. They don't want to come near her because she's a necromancer. Although in her case, necromancy is much more about magical medicine. She's a surgeon. She's a physician. They don't realize that right away. They see black robes and think, oh, she's going to create undead. And she slowly starts to realize there are magical mysteries on this frontier that she might be uniquely positioned and uniquely capable of solving and dealing with. So the first book is just out. Just came out in April. Got it right here. Called The Warden from Tor. Book 2 is called Necrobane and should be out, is tentatively next April, next year. And book 3, it has a title, but I don't think I can say it or say anything about release dates yet.
But this is, if somebody wanted to jump in, it sounds like you're pretty quick fire with the releases.
That's the idea.
They're not going to be waiting 10 years.
That's the hope. No, hopefully no long wait. I mean, I suffer the pain of that. I'm not going to talk badly about any other writer. Like, it's hard. Writing is hard. Yeah. But I was just talking with a friend today about a book. I've been waiting for the third book in a trilogy. The second book came out in 1997. I don't think the third book's coming out. Yeah, I just don't think it's going to happen. But so I hopefully am never going to leave people hanging that way.
So, I hope people go check it out. I'll be picking up my copy. I like the cover of that one quite a lot. It looks really cool.
Yeah, Chris Cold was the cover artist. He did a great job.
Yeah.
Really great.
So the Warden, people should go check that out. I'll link to your website in the description so people can check it out in the show notes and go pick up their copy. And hopefully, if we get you into the Discord server, then people can fire away questions at you as they read. And
absolutely.
We'll create a spoiler-filled discussion channel for that.
Oh, yeah. I would love to do that.
Cool. All right. Well, Dan Ford, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a lot of fun to just shoot the breeze about tropes for a while.
Yeah.
So my thanks to you for coming on. And to everybody else, thank you for listening. Make sure you go to thelegendarium.com. Again, that link is in the show notes. And when you get to thelegendarium.com, you can find a link to Discord. It's an open server, so that link is available to anybody to come join in. But just make sure you follow the rules so that we can keep you in there.
Great.
And keep it a nice place. We also have a link to our Patreon channel where you can throw a buck in the tip jar. I actually have, speaking of the Wheel of Time reread, Todd and I, Todd being one of the other hosts here, Todd is doing a read of Wheel of Time for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to be talking about his experience. We recorded one episode after he finished the first book, and then we'll do every couple of books after that. That's going to be a Patreon exclusive. So Everybody go check out our Patreon channel. And other than that, I think we're good. So thanks everybody again for listening. Dan, thank you for coming on, and I will see everybody next time.